How's it going, Frosty friends, and welcome to today's entry in the Tactical Training Camp series, where we're going to focus on the A to Z of the finer points of fighting. So anytime you feel like you're lost during a fight, then this series is for you. We're going to cover simple exercises and fundamentals that are going to help you know what decisions you need to be making individually in a tactically sound way as you start to flesh out your own playbook and playstyle. So today's topic in this segment is going to be closing distance and applying pressure. Specifically, I'm referring to the scenario that I've seen come up a lot at many different levels of play, where two squads will kind of get stuck, for lack of a better word, at the mid-range. They both have decent lines of sight, relatively equal quality of positions, and the issue is just that neither can seem to create sufficiently great of an opening that they will feel comfortable pushing off of that. And I think a lot of people may fall into the trap of just farming the damage and thinking to themselves, oh, this is fine, we're charging up our Evo shields. The trouble with that is that if you ever actually wind up killing that squad that you're trading forever and ever with, then they're going to have gutted all of their heals too. So they're not going to have batteries to give you, because you're going to have forced them to use all of their batteries. And they're not going to have, and you're not going to have batteries because you had to use all of your batteries when you were fighting them. And so now both squads will be depleted regardless of who wins that fight. So that scenario, just from that perspective, is not great for squads. The other thing is that it causes the fight to take a really long time, and fighting in Apex Legends is very loud, which means that you will get third party if you get caught fighting someone else. So for both of those reasons, this situation of getting stuck at the mid-range, seems, harmless-ish at first, but is actually a much bigger deal than people realize. So now that so you may be sitting there now thinking, okay, I get it, Frosty. Getting stuck at the mid-range, no bueno. We don't like that. So then how do I keep that from happening? So I guess the simple exercise that you can use when you're playing is you're going to be looking for when you break an enemy. When you break an enemy, you're going to want to get closer to them. So, ideally, you push and you fully close distance into close range where it's impossible for the enemy to heal off the damage. If not, you just get closer. You make a cover transition that's, relatively safe, and you get closer. And then you break their armor again at mid-range. So that's sort of just the trick at its simplest. Is you're going to want to watch for those breaks in armor. So ideally, you're just hitting your shots and you're the ones that's breaking your armor, but the tactic actually works just fine if your teammate calls out that they've broken out armor on an enemy as well. And in the worst case, in the very worst case, you're just guessing. That's like your last ditch, is if you aren't hitting your shots and your teammates aren't providing you with callouts of whether they're hitting their shots, then you just have to guess when those knocks, if you intend to try to close distance and for whatever reason you feel that you need to, then that's sort of your last resort, is you just have to pay attention to which enemies your teammates are shooting and try and guess whether they've hit enough shots. It's wow, they shot a pretty fair chunk of bullets there. So those are all the signs. And so it can seem a little scary sometimes approaching when, it's just a knock or just a broken shield that you got on the enemy. I guess the important thing to remember is that when you've broken someone's armor, you've actually got a really, really big advantage on them. So the first and most obvious advantage is that any character that's not Caustic or Gibraltar is going to suffer from aim punch. And some of you may have heard me talk about aim punch a lot. It's a really, really, really big deal. And so aim punch is a thing that happens. It's a mechanic in the game where any character that does not have the fortified perk like Gibraltar and Caustic, once their armor is broken if their aim will like kick around like all crazy, like anytime that they get hit on their flesh after that. So when your armor gets broken, like you'll kick around once, and then there's like a slight cooldown before it can happen again, and then if you continue to get hit on your flesh, then your aim's gonna jump around all crazy, and it's gonna be really, really hard for you to hit shots. And so, you know, you can definitely experiment with it in the firing range, but it's random, it's very significant, and it is extremely hard to factor for and deal with. And so if you get hit with aim punch and you're not expecting it, it can be the difference, because it will take you a few moments to correct your aim. It can be the difference between life or death, because you'll be hitting like the next like 3 or 4 bullets or not. So huge deal on that front, which is one of the reasons why having your armor broken is such a problem. The other is that 100 HP goes by really fast in Apex. Really, really fast. 100 HP is a very thin margin of error to work with. And most players aren't going to be able to react to getting shot within 100 HP's worth of damage. And it doesn't even have to be you. So you can break the enemy and leave them on 100 HP. And then it just takes even like your teammate looking at them sideways the wrong way, and before they can react to it, that enemy will be knocked. So players overall are very reluctant to play around the disadvantage of having broken armor. So 9 times out of 10, when you break someone's armor, the thing they're going to do is step back into cover, like a sane, rational human being. It may come as a surprise to many.
Let's explore this way. Need to recharge my shield.
So when your enemy steps back into cover, starts using those heals, ideally, you would like to get close enough to be able to knock them for using their heal. But unfortunately, that's just not in the cards sometimes. And so you go for the next best thing, which is closing distance. So you just keep inching closer and closer and closer, but eventually you are at that distance where if they start to heal, they know that you can just rip around the corner on them and take them out. That's sort of the situation you're trying to create, and you just, I guess, take a little bit of a long-term game to it in terms of getting there. So the idea itself is pretty straightforward. There are a couple of things that you really need to be careful and watch out for. So particularly, you need to be careful. So each time you make a hop, right? So you break an armor, make a hop, break an armor, make a hop. So each time you make one of those hops, you need to double check to make sure that your next hop is not going to make it so that you can't get back. So if you're taking hops forward, did I just pass a bolt? No. If you're taking hops forward and you're looking at your next hop and you're worried that it's going to result in a situation where you're cut off from being able to retreat to your teammates, then you probably need to either find a different hop to take or just hold down the position for a second, because you're sufficiently far forward ahead of your teammates at this point that they can probably actually just move up to you instead. And so you just need to hold the space for them so that they move up, is what is probably happening there. So if your hop is ever going to, you know, if your next hop would take you into a situation where you can't go back, then you probably just need to chill for a second. Heal up, maybe throw a grenade, you know, find something different to do than repositioning. Maybe climb up to some high ground if you got the opportunity to. Never a bad call, honestly. In situations where you can't push forward, you can also try moving sideways. And so if you move sideways, then what's going to happen is you're actually going to create that crossfire that we talked about in Friday's video, which is going to make it really difficult for the enemies to even use the cover at all. So maybe you're not in like sufficiently close range where you just like get to walk in, use your close range option and like knock them easily, but you're going to make it really hard for them to be able to be safe while they heal, because, you know, healing requires that you stand still. All right, just to recap, we
You're in their sights.
sort of pointed out sort of what the situation you're trying to avoid is, which is like getting stuck at that mid-range where both squads are trying to poke eternally at each other and not killing each other, and why it's bad. So you should be able to identify that situation now and realize that recognize that it's happening. And now you've got a response and a plan for how you deal with that situation, right? Which is going to be break armor, take a hop forward. Break armor, take a hop forward. And also some of the things you need to watch out for when you're employing that tactic.